Hello and welcome to another episode of Cavell Cloud Conversations. Joined today by the head of Cavell, an exciting departure from our usual guest, Patrick, who is here to talk about investment opportunities. How are we doing, Matt?
I'm very good. I'm very honoured to be brought onto the podcast. So excited.
Well, Patrick is good, but I think you've got a lot more sort of knowledge to share that people will be interested in as well.
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay, so the topic today, obviously, we have our Cavell Invest event coming up on June the 4th in London. So if you're an investor interested in the CX, the comms, any other spaces I'm missing?
Yeah, mainly the whole business comms space, including CX, MSPs, etc. We've got we'll have a lot of PE investors, a lot of the C-level execs from those companies. It's focused on investment though, so it's really only for that audience. We'll be talking strictly about that topic. So if you're looking for product information or stuff like that, you'll be in the wrong place. But if you want to find out what's really going on in the investment world in this area, it's the place to be.
Exactly. So if you are one of those investors, do get in touch. Do try and come along. I mean, it's usually very well attended. It's got a great sort of range of the top names from companies in the UK and across Europe, even some Americans flying over for it. So it's a really good event to come to if that's your interest. So I guess to kickstart then the discussion, so this podcast is to tie into that a little bit and talk about investment opportunities and current market moves and trends in those spaces. So I guess the question to start us off with is maybe we'll talk a bit about CX and then about comms. What are the main sort of investment cases going on at the moment that are driving the CX space?
Yeah, well, it's a fascinating place, partly because there's a lot of activity. So we've seen a number of the platform players come to market for new investment, and also we've seen some of the broader CX companies, some of the MSPs coming to market. So it's quite a hot topic right now. So the reason that's happening and why there's a lot of interest is, I think, because there's an inherent value perceived around improving enterprises' relationships with their customers. And in some ways, that's thought of in terms of a formal contact center. And that certainly is a market that's going through a lot of transition, the traditional fixed to cloud transition. But then there is, that market is so big. Where is the broader CX opportunity? And that's what people, I think, are particularly investors are interested in, as well as that formal, very exciting, changing CCaaS market. What about the broader informal CX market? I think, and so interest, because just companies in market, so people are always interested to kind of find out opinions. But I think also we've seen quite a lot of the value associated with that. So enterprises are willing to spend quite a bit of money on improving their relationships with their customers, and therefore that's a pretty interesting investment area and going through a lot of change. So I think
it's interesting. I think it's interesting because the last podcast obviously dealt with Enterprise Connect and all the trends coming out of that. A lot of what we saw was discussion about obviously the rapid pace of change in CX, the rapid adoption of new technologies, because of course there is value in that customer space that is very tangible, very ROI driven. We also saw, of course, that discussion of the informal contact center, this idea that there are lots of people in your business who could operate as contact center agents who have needs to talk to customers but aren't currently. Are we seeing that at the moment a lot of these sort of research and acquisition focused on new technology, or are we seeing a lot more of the targeting of that legacy base that is desirable of change, I guess is the question. So for those who aren't aware, there is a large legacy install base of contact centers that are running on a mix of on-prem, hybrid. They're not AI enabled. They're not doing all of those fancy things that we're hearing about. Where are people looking at the most?
Yeah, and I think this is the key question, is where is the value created? So in that ecosystem from in the formal, from the platform through to the integrator, through to some of the value added services that are being companies that are merging around the ecosystem, to the customer, who's going to capture most of the value? And one of the things I've thought for a while, but it's been reiterated to me very recently, in the formal contact center market, it's been quite difficult to enter and open up the value, because actually there's some fairly dominant platform players. And also, there's a few, I estimate, I was talking to a few people, there's probably 5 to 10 companies who are MSPs or integrators who are serving that market and who have got the skills to sell, which is quite a complex sell in a large contact center, who have created and captured that value. And I was in Germany and Holland this week, and I was kind of testing that principle with some MSPs, and they were saying, yeah, there is a small group. So does the value lie with the platform? Does the value lie with the integrator? Or does the value lie with other ecosystem technologies that are emerging around that formal contact center? You know, whether it's AI, whether it's bot technology, you know, analytics technologies, lots of different technologies which are kind of emerging around that is kind of the key question. And, you know, so that's in sort of the formal area, and we're discussing where that lies. And at the moment, it's going to be quite interesting because certainly in the UK, we're seeing some of those MSPs come to market, the CCaaS ones, and it's a little bit private information, but one of them has just come to market, and you know it'll be interesting to see how that's received by investors. And then there's the eye on the broader massive opportunity. So if I was a technology provider or platform provider, I had some challenges serving the formal contact center market because it's quite hard to reach. I've had to work with the platform guys, or I had to go through these quite small routes to market or go direct, which is quite tricky. But as I go to the SME and I see the broader CX opportunity, maybe it's easier for me to serve that market. And we've seen, you know, some really good businesses established there, like Tollring and a Kixi and others who really came out serving analytics and the CX opportunity in the SME. So we are seeing, you know, people looking at that broader informal space, that space between UCaaS and CCaaS. I was in Holland yesterday talking with Enreach CEO Stein, and he was talking about, he has a formal contact center business which is very successful in Spain, but he was talking more about the broader opportunity in that informal contact center again, because of the challenge that his routes to market to sell his normal SMB products can sell simple bundled on CX offerings, but would struggle to sell a formal contact center. So I think people are looking at that broader CX SMB opportunity and the ability to target it easier through channels than, you know, than what was seen in the formal market.
And I think that's very important to acknowledge both of those points, kind of, and how they tie into what people are saying in the market. I mean, you've got the formal contact center, which is undergoing more and more rapid paces of change. The technology developers keep coming out with their latest new AI thing that does some AI thing, too many things to list. And, you know, what I heard from enterprises when I was at Enterprise Connect was fatigue in terms of this is changing very fast. We keep getting asked to pay for new things. Why the distinction as to what qualifies as an add-on versus an upgrade versus a new product line, you know, in terms of, oh, they want $40 for this, but in a year's time that's obsolete. You know, there's this very big sort of fatigue thing going on the technology side, and it becomes difficult, I think, then for the service provider market to try and figure out what they pass on to their customers, what they sell, what they bundle, and how to handle that rapid rate of change that's coming down the market. And then on the smaller side, again, also heard the same thing. All these technology vendors are starting to think, how do we play in the SMB market? And it is, you know, people like Ring that you would expect to see, you know, starting to offer things like RingX. And there are lots of different other examples of these things starting to target the SME. But also interestingly is also people like Zoom and Microsoft. You know, and you're looking at these SMBs, you know, who are customers of our comm service provider partners who are using Microsoft Teams, and you're saying, okay, they want to get their Microsoft Teams users to communicate with the end customer. And then you start to see innovative companies like Leap Expert, who we met at Enterprise Connect, starting to say, well, how do you get your Teams users to communicate with the end user in a seamless way? You know, and I think there is a puzzle piece there for the CSP market, because and small enterprises and SMBs are never going to do this by themselves, right? They could go out and buy the Ring Central add-on that makes all of their people contact center users, but it's never that simple. It's never that straightforward. there is a market there for someone to come in and help understand.
Yeah, and there is lots of interesting little technology companies like Code doing the queuing into Teams, and that have emerged around the CX space, and obviously the some we mentioned earlier, Pixie, Tollring, etc. I think what's interesting is, as it's becoming more complex, we certainly heard at our Cavell Summit we had an enterprise panel there, and the enterprise panel said they are now looking for partners again. So previously they'd have put an RFP out and who gave them the best price and service offer they would go with. But now they're actually valuing that advice element as well, which is where I think these CSPs have got an interesting role to play. Because it is so complicated. There is so many things, moving parts. There is so many different, and it was very interesting, not only I think around the area of CCaaS, but broadly around things like collaboration and security is another top one, which you've spent some time in, where the complexity of what's being asked of these enterprises now means that they are looking again to specialist partners. So I think the role of the partner, which is everybody appears to be an MSP now, which is the latest terminology, but a partner that can serve multiple products with real expertise is emerging and stronger and stronger. As I say, I was with Yielder Group over in Holland this week as well, a very interesting company leading on security, but build out multiple product sets areas now. So strong in comms, networking, etc. So it's interesting. But this is the big question about CX: is the value for the investor in that in those technology companies who are providing the pieces around it? Is it in the platforms? Is it in the MSPs? Is it in now the broader channel and service providers who can bring forward, like Ring, these more easily accessible CX offers, Gamma? Most of the major service providers have got offerings now in that area. So do they unlock the value, and can they really turn their channel on to offering, these services? So I think that's the kind of conundrum that service providers are really thinking through, who's gonna win. And I think the problem is, and you've done a lot of research, we've done a lot of enterprise research in understanding that informal market a lot better than we all SMB market, depending on how you want to think about it. The formal contact center, we can tell you exactly how many there are in most countries, how many people are in them. They're on this huge transition from cloud to from premise. So there's a real opportunity there, which is tangible. And there's the opportunity around, I guess the only other question I get asked all the time is, what is the impact of virtual agents? What's going on? How does in that formal area, how does, numbers of agents change? Will that be a downturn? So that's the other kind of big question. I think they're the questions that will come up at the event amongst the panel in terms of their opinions. So
but I mean, virtual agents is something that we could tackle for quite a while. Maybe we won't cover it in this thing, but there is a general question mark which we'll leave for the audience to think about themselves in terms of how much is the rollout of virtual agents going to affect the proposition, the value proposition in the space, and of course, who makes the money? I mean, does the money start flowing away from the company back into the pockets of the technology vendor who makes the virtual agent, or does it stay with the CSP or the person deploying the contact center solution? But let's not tackle that now. We've talked about contact center for a while, but let's pivot just a bit to comms as kind of a focus just for a minute. Now, I could be pithy and say, the way to make money doing comms is to do contact center work, because that seems to be what a lot of the comms people are talking about. Microsoft Zoom, all those collab guys, they're all talking about how they can enable customer contact. But it's not the be all and end all of the space. People do still need to communicate. So what are we seeing in the comms space?
Well, I mean, it's at different levels, we're seeing different things. So one of the things we are seeing is consolidation. So we have seen a massive consolidation amongst the cloud comms. We're seeing consolidation amongst the cloud comms providers themselves as scale becomes more important. As it becomes more of a not consolidated space, and the space becomes less advanced and more commodity, We're seeing people consolidate. We're seeing people take vertical plays. So as the market matures and we get over 50% in certain markets, usual things are happening: consolidation, verticalization, and people working out how they're going to add value. So we see a few different strategies. We've seen quite a bit of roll up, and we're going to talk about that both at the channel level, so comms channels being rolled up and often being turned into broader MSPs who have broader capability than just comms, which is one of the big.
Do we want to just pause for a second, just because I mean our audience will come at this from different things. Should we just briefly explain the difference between a roll up versus an acquisition versus a pile up? Like those different terms, just as briefly as you can, just so everyone's on the same level.
Yeah. So a lot of people have an investment thesis, which is I'm basically going to go and buy a number of companies in the same segment. I'm basically buying them quite often for their customer base. So I'm going to go and roll up a number, 10 different voice resellers in the UK. I'm going to make some money because I'm going to drive some synergies through that business, because I'm going to be able to take out management teams. I'm going to be able to offer single platforms. I'm going to gain from a pure economies of scale approach. And when we joke about pile up, is sometimes people just buy lots of businesses and form a pile up because they haven't really integrated the businesses ever. So they've just ended up piling up a whole load of businesses, never done any of the integration. So you've got customers on different OSS, basic core systems, etc. So, and when money was cheap, which is not anymore, when interest rates were low, it was very easy to borrow money. So people would quite easily have a case for going and buying lots of companies. As the cost of money rose, as we had higher interest rates, it's now harder to buy money to do that, to borrow money to do that. So people are being so people are becoming more focused on driving the synergies, driving value, buying the right assets. So you see some companies who are just buying user basis, some who are buying specific skills. So they're an MSP, let's say they're an MSP and they want to buy an IT capability to add to they're a voice prominent provider and they want to add IT so that they can then do a cross sell, upsell. Companies like, if you look at Curve Group, good friends of ours, have bought multiple businesses over time to build product capability. They haven't really done a roll up in terms of customers. They've done more of a strategic acquisition of certain capabilities, so Microsoft capabilities, SD-WAN capabilities, etc., to build a broader brand of product set. Whereas some people are literally out there buying multiple customer bases. They're literally just buying the customers. They've already got a common products. So we're gonna have a bit of discussion about that, because it is, as money's got more expensive, the market's got tougher. There's this big question about, why did you buy these 20 customers and companies, and did you ever really integrate them? And are you able to show the benefits of that? So there's become a lot of focus on, still there's a good case for obviously scaling your business and buying other businesses, but are you really driving the proper synergies? Are you really doing it for the right reasons, etc.? So we're going to have, I think, quite an interesting debate about that. We've got some of the key players who have been involved in that space speaking. So both some of the private equity, I think we've got Ailish from LDC, who's been a backer of a number of the businesses that have done the roll-ups. I think we've got Cloud Clever speaking, who are one of the new guys who've bought a few companies recently. So we've got some interesting players. So that's the kind of difference. So a few years ago, there was just people buying. They were just like, it was like, not like the Klondike, but, you could get very cheap capital. So you bought businesses and, everything was good. You built up your revenue line, but now people are looking for synergies and looking for how that's worked out. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've covered kind of, I think, quite a lot there, actually. I think we could talk about this for a lot longer, but I think this kind of makes for a nice bit of an episode length, if we'll call it that. So this, I guess, is just a shout out. If you found what we were talking about this episode interesting, do reach out to us, come along to the event. There will also be more podcasts on this topic in the run up to the event, and some guests. I know, Matt, we're talking about Ubri or some of your investment partners as guests and interviewing them. So I'm sure the audience will find that very interesting. So, stay tuned for that. And of course, like and subscribe, tell people about the podcast, all that kind of stuff. And thanks for listening.
Great. Thanks very much, Finbarr.